My guest this week is Carol Tavris, a social psychologist, a lecturer, a writer whose books include Anger and The Mismeasure of Woman. She's written on psychological topics for the LA Times, the New York Times, Scientific American, Skeptical Inquirer magazine, and many other publications. A fellow of the American Psychological Association and the Association for Psychological Science, and a member of the editorial board of Psychological Science and the Public Interest. She's also a fellow of the Center for Inquiry's Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. Her new book is Mistakes Were Made, But Not By Me, Why We Justify Foolish Beliefs, Bad Decisions, and Hurtful Acts. It was co-authored with Elliot Aronson, who is one of the most distinguished social psychologists in the world. Welcome to Point of Inquiry, Carol Tavris.
I'm very happy to be here, DJ.
Professor Tavris, as a magician, one of my big interests is the topic of deception and self-deception. I'm talking about things like charlatans out there who've come to believe that they actually are legitimate. You know, psychics who begin to believe their own spiel, or faith healers who talk themselves into believing that they're really healing people. Your book, in a more general way, touches on some of these psychological dynamics going on in our heads that lets us get away with stuff like that, lets us live with ourselves. Your book's about the topic of dissonance theory, the theory of cognitive dissonance. Let's start off by your telling me what that is.
Cognitive dissonance is the state of discomfort we feel when one thing we believe is contradicted by evidence, or when we do something that is inconsistent with our view of ourselves, or when we hold two ideas that are mutually contradictory. Every smoker knows this problem. If you smoke and you know it could kill you, that's being in a state of dissonance, and you have to do one of two things. You have to dismiss, reduce, ignore the evidence that smoking could kill you, or you have to stop smoking. So dissonance is a motivational state. It's really uncomfortable. It's the discomfort you feel when something you believe really deeply, suddenly somebody comes up and says, you know, this belief you have in how to raise your children, look, let me show you this fabulous new study showing that you're wrong. What is it that most people do? They don't say, oh, thank you for this wonderful new study showing me that I'm wrong. They say, oh, piss off and take your stupid study with you. So what science does, the reason that science is so important and interesting and contrary to the way the human mind is designed, is that it forces us into dissonance. Science is the mechanism that requires us to test our beliefs against the evidence. And if the evidence doesn't support what we believe, we have to change our belief. But in general, that's not how the mind is designed. The brain, we now understand, is pretty much wired to look for information that confirms what we believe, and to ignore or forget or overlook information that disconfirms what we believe. When we look at the behavior of people like that we all think are hypocrites or frauds or charlatans, as you just said, we say, how can they live with themselves? How can they live with the knowledge of the scam they're perpetrating on somebody? And sometimes scam artists know exactly what they're doing. They don't have any dissonance to resolve. They think people are just easy marks, and why not take advantage of them? But for the most part, the problem is the well-meaning people who have a deeply embedded belief that they have psychic powers, or that they can tell where the body is buried. Their way of processing information is to exclude all evidence indicating that they're wrong. That's how they can sleep at night.
So you say it's especially uncomfortable for us if those ideas causing this cognitive dissonance are about who we are as a person. This cognitive dissonance about one's self-image is what's leading to self-deception, you're saying. No one wants to admit, maybe they're even hardwired or unable to admit how bad they actually are. Well,
it's more like this. When there are two dissonant beliefs, I smoke and I know it's bad for me, that's bad enough. But when the dissonance is between your belief that you are a good, smart, competent person and the fact that you have just done something stupid, mean, cruel, or incompetent, now you have to reduce that dissonance in one of two ways. What most people do is justify the bad, foolish, stupid, cruel, harmful behavior in order to preserve their belief that they are good, smart, and competent. That's how self-justification works, and that's why it can, over time in the aftermath of a decision, lead us into disaster. Because with every step we make, justifying an action we've taken or a belief we hold, a decision we've made, we roll along justifying that, and then it becomes harder and harder for us to say, boy, was I wrong. Boy, did I really screw up here, and change direction.
Professor, before we get to bigger social questions regarding cognitive dissonance and self-deception, I want to ask about how all this plays out in my normal day-to-day world. Some of the happiest people I know are people who, sure, they might be going around offending other people, even getting told off regularly when they do, but when they get told off, they respond by saying something like, oh, that guy who just told me off, he must be having a bad day. In other words, they don't actually accept responsibility for their actions. When they upset people, they make it the other person's fault, not their own. On the other hand, I know really miserable people, absolutely miserable human beings, I'm sorry to say, who seem excellent at accepting responsibility for all of their negative actions. They're so good at it that they actually kind of seem to go out of their way to feel bad about who they are. So here's the question. Isn't it better to be the person who's happy-go-lucky, even if you're a little ignorant about how much harm you're actually doing in the world?
That's a terrific question, and you've got two issues kind of schmoogled together here. One is the question of taking responsibility for a mistake. It's not that that makes you happy or not happy. There are people who are buck passers and blamers who never take responsibility, just in the way that you describe. And it makes them happy because they don't have to take responsibility and they don't have to feel bad. And then there are people who reduce dissonance not by justifying what they did, but by blaming themselves. That's really at the heart of your question. Instead of saying, well, I had to hit that person, I had to insult that person, he deserved it, he started it, it's his fault. Yes, it's entirely my fault. Everything is my fault. In fact, everything I do in the world is my fault. Then you bet that will make people unhappy, and there certainly are people who reduce dissonance by blaming themselves too much. They go the wrong direction, let's say. So the goal here is to understand that when we make any decision, whether it's buying a car, buying a house, taking a new job, deciding whether our beloved partner's behavior was their fault or not their fault, every one of those things we're going to justify in some way. We're going to have to reduce dissonance in some way. And there are more helpful, productive ways of reducing dissonance, and then there are unhelpful and self-defeating ways of reducing dissonance. For example, in every relationship, we're always faced with the question of how to think when our beloved partner does something dorky, stupid, thoughtless, or mean. Okay? And happy couples do the thing you were just suggesting. They don't blame the partner. They forgive the partner. They see the flaw as something the partner couldn't help, as a rare thing, not part of the beloved's wonderful, adorable nature. Other people resolve the dissonance in a different way, and they say, my God, I made a terrible decision to be with this person. This person's behavior reflects their character down to their toes, and I've really made the wrong decision here. So in this way, in our daily relationships and how we are with our children, our parents, how we see our own behavior and other people's behavior is going to have really powerful consequences for how we get along with them. And by the way, when we do say, honey, I was wrong, I am so sorry, I made a big mistake, those people are not more likely to be miserable and unhappy. They get a terrific response from people around them. Don't you like it when your friend says to you, DJ, you know that argument we had? Let me tell you, you were absolutely right and I was totally wrong.
I'm not sure how much I should admit I like that, but
we all do.
Yeah.
We all